After Karen left, Petty finally understood that the only person who had ever brought her peace was no longer in this world. Shiro, feeling deeply saddened, asked Petty about her plans. With a heavy heart, Petty admitted that she had no home to return to, having been cast out by her tribe. She also wanted to reveal to Shiro the cursed mark on her belly, which was seen by her people as a sign of impending disaster. This was why Petty was never wanted. Even her parents had abandoned her, barely tolerating her presence in the village until now. With no place to accept her, Petty felt truly lost. Once, there had been a nest of giant beetles in the forest, their numbers dwarfing the fairies. Thousands of these beetles began to see the fairies as prey, causing their population to explode and devastate everything around them. The villagers blamed Petty for the beetle attacks, claiming her presence was the cause and that she should have left long ago. Furious upon hearing this, Shiro declared that it was absurd to think Petty could cause such a disaster. The beetles had nested in the forest, and Petty couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Maybe she really was a disaster. Her name, Petty Fulu, was given by the tribe's chief and ironically meant one who defies fate. It was the same chief who first cast her out. It felt like a cruel joke. After being exiled, she had saved Shiro, a fool about to drown, hoping he might help her find someone. But in the end, she felt like the fool. Unable to hold back her tears, Anna called out to Petty, who floated above. Petty gently touched Anna's hair to calm the little girl. After a moment of contemplation, Shiro asked Petty if she wanted to save her tribe. He suspected she wouldn't care about the fate of those who had exiled her, but Petty didn't hesitate to say yes. She owed her name to the chief, and her parents were still in the forest. They might hate her, but they were her parents, and it was her home. She wanted to save them. Shiro, determined, told her they would save the fairies together. Crying, Petty asked if he really meant it, and Shiro responded with a look of resolve. They headed to the Travelers Guild to present their request to NEI and some members. Everyone seemed shocked by the number of giant beetles. NEI understood the situation but couldn't accept the request. It was 200% impossible. Facing an entire army of beetles would require at least half the guild's members. Shiro realized the cost would be enormous, both in money and manpower, depleting the guild's primary resources. But that wasn't all NEI revealed. The travelers were currently engaged in the search for an ancient relic. If the beetle nest were closer to Nino, it would be a different story. In short, the guild would not participate in this battle. Just as Petty was on the verge of leaving, Shiro called out, stopping her in her tracks. He proposed an alternative idea, suggesting a mutually beneficial deal instead of a mere request. With a fluid motion, Shiro gestured to reveal his storage space, a dimension of his own. He proposed that the guild find the location of the ancient relic, and in return, he would use his spatial transportation abilities to help them move their equipment. He was confident this would significantly speed up their operations and compensate for the time spent battling the beetle infestation. Nei's initial reaction was one of surprise and intrigue. Shiro explained that he possessed a magical item with enchanted space storage capabilities, able to hold up to 3 vehicles. While Shiro's proposal was generous, it wasn't enough to sway the guild's decision. The conversation seemed to reach an impasse when suddenly, a deep, gruff voice echoed from the back. It was Erdo's, with his unmistakable tone. Erdos, intrigued by the situation, asked Shiro about his plan. Shiro quickly explained their goal, to exterminate the giant beetle nest located in the eastern part of the forest. Without hesitation, Erdos accepted Shiro's request. Shiro felt a mix of relief and concern and questioned Erdos about his quick approval. Erdos reminded him of their previous bet over drinks, stating that since he lost, he was obliged to fulfill a request from Shiro. Despite Shiro's concerns about needing substantial manpower to tackle the beetle threat, Erdos confidently declared that he alone was enough to dismantle the monster nest single-handedly. At that moment, Ralph and Hawa joined the conversation. Members of the Azure Sky group volunteered to help as well. However, NEI remained firm, refusing to give her approval. She emphasized that accepting a request without the guild's sanction was illegal, and she was not prepared to allow it. Erdos and Ralph stood their ground. Erdos was motivated by a promise from a bet, while Ralph simply extended a helping hand to a friend. They insisted they would not accept any financial reward for their involvement. Nesca chimed in, noting that if no reward was taken, it technically wouldn't count as fulfilling an official request. Keela also joined in, voicing support for Shiro. Moved by his friend's outpouring of support, Shiro promised to treat them to celebratory drinks once their mission was accomplished. Hearing talk of celebratory drinks, other members paused to inquire. Shiro revealed that it would be the same legendary drink he offered everyone a few days earlier, and perhaps even some fairy mead. The mention of this legendary drink had everyone excited and eager to join the battle. NEI was bewildered, watching everyone abandon their relic hunting tasks. At that moment, Petty the fairy flew in, adding credibility to Shiro's words. She declared that the special drink was indeed made for her. Seeing the fairy, NEI was confused by the unfolding events, thinking Shiro only wanted to exterminate the giant beetles without understanding the deeper cause. Shiro had no choice but to explain the situation to NEI and the others. He revealed that Petty the fairy was actually his boss and the one determined to destroy the beetle nest to save her relatives. As an ordinary merchant, Shiro couldn't face the monsters alone. At this point, Shiro bowed deeply before NEI, pleading with her to save the fairy tribe. Petty, in tears, approached NEI to negotiate, promising to make honey wine for every guild member if they agreed to help save her family. She too bowed her head, begging for assistance. NEI rubbed her forehead, feeling a headache coming on, and exclaimed that it was all too much. Shiro's desperate plea made her feel like a heartless villain. With a firm voice, she commanded all members from bronze rank and above to prepare for battle. Soon after, everyone gathered at the Jig Forest. Petty led them closer to the beetle nest. The beetle infestation had trapped the fairies in their homes, preventing them from gathering food and causing them to suffer from hunger and helplessness. Ancient architectural structures, now occupied by monstrous beetles, came into view. Shiro remarked to Pembohong that this must be the ancient magical civilization's relics the guild had been searching for. The chief of Petty's tribe had mentioned that this place used to be a cave, but long ago an unknown species built the structures now standing. NEI found this discovery fascinating and quickly devised a plan to minimize casualties. Everyone was divided into 3 groups. 6 myth-ranked individuals formed the assault team under Nei's direction. 17 gold-ranked members were positioned at the gates to handle any bugs that flew out, and the remaining 56 silver-ranked members were tasked with dealing with anything that emerged from the exterior. This was their strategy to exterminate the giant insects, and they couldn't afford any mistakes. NEI continued organizing, assigning Erdos, a diamond-ranked member, to stand by in case the worst happened. Before she could say more, Shiro pointed out Erdos, who was already leading the way straight into the insect's lair. NEI was left speechless, her eyes wide with amazement. The Azure Sky group remained behind to protect Shiro and the others. As the plan unfolded, everyone followed Erdos into the lair to exterminate the terrifying insects. The battle was intense. Shiro watched closely from outside, glancing nervously at his watch. 2 hours had passed when NEI finally emerged at the cave entrance. Shiro ran up to her, anxious for news. Berto followed shortly, laughing arrogantly and commenting that the young folks had underestimated him. It was just a morning workout for him. NEI stood beside him, reluctantly admitting that Erdos had single-handedly wiped them all out and ensured there were no survivors. Shiro and his friend, stunned and relieved, couldn't believe this man had pulled it off. Shiro then inquired about the presence of the insect boss in the cave. Erdos seemed unconcerned, assuring that if there had been one, he would have taken it down himself, though it would have required considerable effort. Berto turned to the fairy Petty, asking if there was any meat or, better yet, some wine. Shiro looked at him, pondering if they should inform the rescued people that it was Petty who had saved them. Suddenly, Petty felt a sharp headache and heard a cry for help in her mind. She shook her head and asked Shiro if he had heard anything, to which he replied he hadn't. Without further hesitation, Petty quickly flew toward the cave, shouting back that she would return soon. Without hesitation, Shiro followed, trailing behind as fast as he could. The liar managed to shout a warning before giving chase. Elsewhere, a small fairy was struggling to escape the clutches of a terrifying insect. Petty quickly flew to the scene, responding to the call for help. She saw the tiny fairy trapped in the pincers of a giant insect. Petty wanted to use her wind-slicing spell to cut the creature in half, but rational thought stopped her impulsive action, realizing it would also harm the fairy. With no other choice, Petty leapt onto the monster, but it viciously attacked her. Without using magic, her strength was insufficient, and she was quickly thrown off. Just then, Shiro and the Celestial Radiance group arrived. Keela took Petty's place, climbing onto the creature and repeatedly stabbing it with a sharp knife, while Nesca used ice magic to shatter its massive pincers. Meanwhile, Petty rushed to aid the exhausted little fairy, but the situation worsened as more swarms of insects emerged. The liar suspected that even more were coming from the nest. Guild members also arrived, but the sheer number of bugs was overwhelming. Eye was bewildered. They had driven off the insects without completely eliminating them inside the cave. One team member suggested there might be an escape route deep within the cave, blocked by monsters. Eye realized his oversight and felt unworthy of leading the team, but self-reflection had to wait as everyone's lives were in danger. Shiro came up with a plan. He asked Petty to stand in front of him with a can of pepper spray and a lighter. Shiro signaled, and a firestorm erupted, burning the swarm. They hadn't anticipated such an explosive effect from combining magic with modern technology. However, their victory was short-lived. They saw the Insect King still hovering, injuring Shiro. Petty tried the same tactic again but failed. The Bug King drew closer, its sharp fangs ready to strike. But before it could act on its evil intentions, a bolt of lightning struck it, causing it to scream in pain before disintegrating into ash and dust. Erdos had arrived just in time, gleefully stating that it had been a while since he enjoyed using his magical axe, Seagull, which he had acquired from an immortal wizard. Shiro, feeling a sense of familiarity, asked Erdos if the axe had any connection to the true judge. Erdos confirmed it, leading Shiro to mention that his grandmother was also a huge fan of Steven Seagal. Surprised, Erdos quickly turned and asked Shiro how he knew about that. Shiro revealed that he was the grandson of Arisu Gu. Realizing the connection, Erdos commented on the family resemblance. As they spoke, Petty was suddenly called by someone. Recognizing the voice, she was shocked to see that it was the village chief. Several fairies emerged, realizing the danger had passed, and invited everyone inside. They were awestruck by the mesmerizing and unique scene. The village chief confronted Petty, questioning why she had returned after being banished and why humans had killed the giant bugs. Petty couldn't hold back and shouted that she shouldn't have to answer these questions after being cast out. Sensing Petty's emotional turmoil, Shiro greeted the village chief and explained that Petty had saved his life. Out of gratitude, he agreed to help eliminate the beetle infestation and save the fairy tribe. The village chief then realized they had been saved by Petty, the one they had deemed cursed. Bitterly, he acknowledged her help. Nesca and the others, curious about Petty's identity, listened as the chief referred to the mark on her stomach, known as the Crest of Calamity. Recognizing the symbol, Nesca explained that it was known to wizards as a sign of immense mana. Those born with this mark had vast magical potential, which could drive someone insane if they couldn't control it. This revelation made sense, as such immense mana could be both a blessing and a curse. Believing that those bearing the mark were destined for a life of misfortune was an outdated notion. The only way to control this immense power was through diligent study of magic from the basics. Those who mastered this source of power would wield an astonishing amount of mana, becoming great wizards, also known as master wizards. Nesca continued explaining that in remote areas, some races still misunderstood and discriminated against those with the crest. However, this mark was not something to be shunned. Instead, it was proof of extraordinary potential. Having learned the basics at the Magic Academy, Nesca offered to teach Petty everything she knew, helping her gain control over her power. If someone with the crest learned to control their mana at will, it would be a tremendous asset to the fairy tribe. The village chief, upon hearing this, could hardly believe his ears. The theories he had been taught since childhood were entirely wrong. Acknowledging his mistake, he realized the true potential Petty held. The village chief bowed and apologized to Petty for all the hardships she had faced. He sought her forgiveness both as the village leader and as her grandfather. Overcome with emotion, the chief knelt and wept. Petty, also in tears, quickly ran to him and took his hand, saying that if she hadn't been exiled, she never would have met Shiro or been able to save the village. Thus, it was the right choice, and no one had wronged her. With the battle over, everyone returned home. Petty followed Shiro back to his shop, but she wouldn't stay long. The village chief mentioned that she would return to the village, and Petty agreed. Anna, realizing the fairy was about to leave, cried in sadness. However, Petty explained that she didn't want to live among humans anymore. Their lives were too short. If they died before her, the loneliness would be unbearable, the price of her long lifespan. In the end, Petty had come to the city to find someone, and now that they were no longer there, she had no reason to stay. Just as Petty was about to fly away, Karen's voice stopped her. Karen had found a letter among her ancestors' belongings, seemingly from her great-grandfather's best friend. She handed it to Petty, who carefully opened it. The letter, written in neat handwriting, began, "To my dearest friend, it has been so long since we last met, and even longer since I promised to see you again. Countless seasons have passed, and the once skinny arms you used to tease me about are now even thinner. Walking has become harder for me, but I still long to run through the forest with you as we used to. I heard that fairies live much longer than humans. You told me your name was Petty Fulu, such a beautiful name. I've whispered it many times while writing this letter. My name is Haroun Saraka. Thank you for finding me, Petty Fulu. Sincerely, your friend, Aaron Sankarika." That was the entire content of the letter Karen's great-grandfather had sent to the fairy. Karen believed her ancestor must have been greatly helped by Petty. The fairy couldn't hold back her tears after reading the letter. She realized his name was Aaron and felt less alone knowing he knew her name too. They had been each other's closest friends. Aaron eventually fell in love, had children, and his grandchildren had always been around him. This made her happy, and she knew she should be happy for Aaron too. Seeing her cry, Shiro comforted her, saying that although human lifespans are short and their time together was limited, the way they thought of each other transcended time. Aaron would live forever in Petty's heart, an unchangeable fact. Even though their time together might not last long, their bond was eternal. He hoped that he and Anna would also live forever in Petty's heart. Then, he took out a photo from his pocket. The picture showed the three of them together. To others, they might seem just like close friends, but the joy on their faces captured the happiness of their moments together. Anna couldn't hold back her tears, realizing Petty might be her closest friend. Lyre, Nesca, Keela, and Ralph, especially Nesca, empathized with Petty's feelings. Nesca, having fairy blood in her veins, would also outlive humans. Yet, Nesca wasn't afraid to love Lyre, cherishing every precious moment they spent together. This was a choice she made for herself. What about Petty? Through her tears, Petty made her decision. The village chief wasn't worried about her leaving immediately, and besides, Nesca had promised to teach her magic. Petty couldn't leave Anna alone. She was still so young. Determined, Petty decided she would return to the village after setting up a gravestone. Hearing this, Shiro silently hoped she wouldn't kill him on the spot, while Anna joyfully hugged Petty, happy she was staying. Thus, the curtain fell on Petty the Fairy's adventure. 2 months passed, and the Harvest Festival was upon them. Shiro had promised Karen to make this festival a grand success. Anna, now a photographer, roamed around with her camera while Shiro and Karen hosted the auction. The first item was a legendary bottle of spirits known as Hero Slayer, which had once brought down a famous hero. It was bought by a man for 44 silver coins. The highlight of the day was a drink cherished by the fairy tribe, known as fairy grass, prepared for auction by a true artisan and newly appointed tourism ambassador, Nina Kaya, also known as Petty. The initial bid for the fairy grass was 1 gold coin, causing a stir among the audience. As more people raised their bids, the auction turned into a resounding success. The event concluded with everyone celebrating the triumphant festival. Shiro sat with Karen and Petty near the town square. They couldn't keep a straight face as they counted the hefty profit they made, 50 gold coins. Thankfully, Nino Rich had established a bank just in time. Karen thanked Shiro, attributing their success to his efforts. Shiro humbly deflected the praise, suggesting that the real credit should go to their boss, the creator of the revenue-generating items. Petty, however, had a different concern. With an awkward question that made both Shiro and Karen blush, she asked if they planned to have children, hinting that humans are often reincarnated, and their child might be Eren reborn. Both Shiro and Karen, flustered, denied it, explaining that humans go through many stages before marriage and having children, emphasizing that children are born out of love and the union between a man and a woman. Their stammered response frustrated Petty, who loudly told them to be quiet. Just then, Anna and her mother arrived. Anna had taken many photos during the festival, attracting numerous customers. Shiro invited everyone for a group photo. Despite the absence of bright lights, the soft glow of lanterns illuminated the small town of Nino Rich, a town created by Eren. As Shiro prepared to take the picture, Petty struck a funny pose, making him laugh so hard he couldn't press the shutter button. Suddenly, a woman's voice called out to Shiro. When he turned around, he saw an unfamiliar face. Confused, he scratched his head, unable to remember meeting her before. The woman then revealed that she was, indeed, Shiro's grandmother. Recalling what Karen had mentioned earlier, Shiro was astonished to find out that his grandmother was not only alive but also attending the Harvest Festival. His greatest wish since embarking on his adventurous business life had been to see his grandmother again, and it had been 2 months since he had last talked about her. In the meantime, Shiro had been attacked by a giant insect, and Petty had saved him from that danger. This significant encounter had led to many events culminating in the Harvest Festival. In the midst of the festival celebrations, a woman claimed to be Shiro's grandmother. Anna was confused because the woman looked so young. The woman then approached Shiro, displaying a strong family resemblance, but Shiro still found it hard to believe. How could an 8-year-old's grandmother appear as a trendy, beautiful young woman? It seemed impossible. Despite Shiro's disbelief, Karen was a bit embarrassed to meet an old acquaintance. Mrs. Arisu asked if everything was going well with the young mayor, and Karen confirmed that this year's Harvest Festival was a grand success, all thanks to Shiro's efforts. Mrs. Arisu looked very pleased and told Shiro that he had grown into a fine man, worthy of his efforts in bringing him to the festival since he was young. At this point, Shiro finally realized that the woman before him was indeed his grandmother. However, he still wanted to confirm further by asking about her film preferences without hesitation. Mrs. Arisu mentioned that her second favorite movie was Braveheart, although she often said Mad Max. Her favorite actor remained Mel Gibson. She expressed her sadness over her grandson's doubts about her identity, recalling an incident when a 7-year-old Shiro had wet the bed after watching a scary movie, and she had to change him. Shiro, embarrassed, closed his eyes tightly. The important thing was that his grandmother had vanished from his life without a proper goodbye, and now, after so many years, she had suddenly reappeared. How could he trust this situation? Feeling guilty for making her grandson sad, Mrs. Arisu tried to comfort him. She pointed at Petty, sensing an immense mana energy from her. Karen quickly introduced Petty as the legendary immortal witch, Arisu Gu. A crowd gathered upon hearing about the immortal witch, astonished by Arisu's appearance this year. Everyone pushed and shoved to catch a glimpse of the famous figure. Realizing she might not be able to enjoy the festival any longer, Mrs. Arisu drew a sword and plunged it into a magical circle. Some recognized it as the sword from Braveheart, the movie starring Mel Gibson. Without much explanation, she directed the weapon at the crowd, causing them to disperse immediately. An unconscious Shiro wondered what his grandmother was doing. Mrs. Arisu explained that it was just an illusion. She then embraced Shiro tightly, ignoring his protests, and flew up towards a rift in the sky, heading back home. As Shiro braced himself, thinking he and his grandmother would crash into the roof, another spatial portal appeared. They passed through it and landed gently in a soft, cozy room. While Arisu remained poised, Shiro found himself sprawled on the floor, foaming at the mouth. Once he recovered, they sat facing each other. Arisu sipped her tea, reminiscing about Shiro's mischievous ways as a child, and noted how he had grown into a handsome and graceful young man. Shiro, filled with questions, first asked about her true identity. Arisu pursed her lips and responded that she had already told him she was a witch, wondering if that wasn't clear enough. Shiro rolled his eyes, asking her to act her age and expressing his desire to know why she disappeared. He recalled the chaos at home on the day she vanished. Unfortunately, Arisu couldn't provide a straightforward answer, citing the many secrets and duties of the spirit world. Shiro, sensing he wouldn't get much information, prepared to ask another pressing question. Anna's youthful appearance resembled the illusion previously created by Arisu, who revealed that her current look was her true, original face. The aged face in the picture was a magical disguise she used while living in her world, and her real face hadn't aged over time. Shiro's doubts were dispelled as Arisu transformed into her wrinkled, elderly appearance. Shiro's reaction shifted from amazement to horror, quickly asking her to change back. Finding the reaction amusing and a bit excessive, Arisu remembered how Shiro's grandfather used to praise her youthful beauty. She fondly recalled intimate moments with him, making Shiro cover his ears in embarrassment, shaking his head to avoid hearing personal stories about his grandparents. Arisu smiled, asking if Shiro had any other questions. She suddenly remembered her late husband, Marisu, and their humble beginnings when they were building their home together. They were completely broke and couldn't afford a honeymoon. During their free time, Arisu came up with a clever plan to find an empty room, which became a cherished memory of their early days together. Arisu used her powers to connect a closet to the magical world of Lu Fio. There, they enjoyed endless adventures, taming beasts, climbing colossal world trees, and even scolding a foolish king for his incompetence. Two unique skills that Shiro now uses were incredible products of Arisu's abilities, which separated her from the constraints of worldly logic. Her powers were so extraordinary that she could launch volcanoes into the sky, command the dead with forbidden spells, and even wield magic strong enough to split the heavens in two. Arisu offered Shiro the choice of this immense power as a gift from his grandmother. It was entirely up to him to decide, and she promised to sit with him until he made his decision. Initially overwhelmed by the unexpected offer, Shiro decided to cherish the moment and spend more time with his grandmother. He decided to prepare sukiyaki, her favorite dish, so they could enjoy a meal together and toast to their unexpected reunion. The next morning, Shiro traveled back to his shop through the spatial portal that bridged the two worlds. He felt a sense of relief knowing that the closet provided a direct connection to the second floor of his shop. He planned to apologize to everyone for his sudden disappearance the previous day. However, he was surprised to find Anna standing behind him. Reacting with shock at his sudden appearance, Anna stammered as she called out to him, and Shiro turned around, equally startled to see her there as well. As Shiro emerged from the spatial rift, he felt the weight of their inquisitive gazes. Anna and Petty, driven by curiosity, immediately asked if he had just returned from the land of the witches. Shiro, feeling increasingly flustered, realized they must have searched the entire town for him after his sudden disappearance. Petty even speculated that he might have been teleported by a witch. Realizing he could no longer hide the truth, Shiro confessed that he had indeed visited his grandmother's home the day before. He explained that Arisu had taken him to a place far away, yet accessible in an instant through her magical transportation. Hearing this, Anna and Petty's eyes lit up with curiosity, urging Shiro to describe what the witch's home was like. Overwhelmed by their eager faces, Shiro struggled to find the right words, only managing to mention that the atmosphere there was vastly different from Nino Rich. Before he could elaborate, the girls excitedly concluded that the stories about Nesca must be true. They continued to press Shiro for more details, and as he tried to back away, he accidentally slipped on a carelessly discarded banana peel, falling into a heap with Anna and Petty. They seized the opportunity to bombard him with even more questions. At that moment, Karen, Emile, and Ralph burst into the room, witnessing the amusing sight of Anna perched on top of Shiro in a rather intimate pose. After taking a moment to clear up the misunderstanding, a sense of calm finally returned to the group. Karen expressed everyone's concerns and thanked Shiro for his honesty, reassuring him that they were just worried about his well-being. Shiro's own mistake in revealing Arisu's identity led to an awkward confession. Ralph asked about Arisu's current whereabouts, and Shiro explained that his grandmother had simply mentioned she would return soon before disappearing. He guessed she would reappear eventually. Karen speculated that Arisu might attend next year's Harvest Festival, hoping it would attract nobles and even royalty. However, this concern was for the future. Right now, Karen had responsibilities as mayor. She needed to collect taxes to deliver to the regional lord. Everyone in the area had to pay these taxes, and she, as the town's representative, would personally deliver them to the lord in the mountains. Karen seemed worried about this task, understandably so, as people generally dislike paying taxes, which could lead to dissatisfaction with the mayor. But there was a more personal reason behind her concern. Her expression turned serious, indicating she had something important to discuss with Shiro. He was caught off guard, misunderstanding the gravity of the situation. Awkwardly, Shiro mentioned that he didn't have a girlfriend. Surprised by Karen's reaction, he realized she didn't mean to confess her feelings but needed privacy to discuss something else. They moved to Shiro's living room, where he brewed hot tea for her. Once settled, Karen suggested they dive into the main topic. She hesitated, unsure how to express her long-standing concern about Shiro. He was taken aback, wondering what she could be worried about. Karen's face turned red with embarrassment, making it difficult for her to continue. Shiro's imagination ran wild, now fully convinced Karen was about to confess her love for him. As he grew more anxious, Shiro's embarrassment also increased. Karen, noticing his discomfort, began to speak, admitting she had been troubled by something for a long time and wanted to discuss it with him. Shiro, feeling awkward, blushed, anticipating her next words might be a confession of hidden love. He prepared himself to respond, ready to reveal his own feelings for her. The room was filled with an uncomfortable silence, neither wanting to break it. Finally, Karen blurted out her question. Why was Shiro's hair so shiny and smooth? Despite her diligent hair care routine, she couldn't achieve the same results. Shiro was stunned, touching his own hair in disbelief. Karen nodded, admiring the shine and softness of his hair, noting how it seemed to form a halo of light around him in the sunlight. Jokingly, Shiro asked if she meant a halo like an angel's. Karen, a mix of envy and admiration, agreed with a smile. Hoping her hair could shine just as brightly for the upcoming event, Karen explained to a now curious Shiro about the upcoming tax presentation to the Count. The Count would host a grand party for distinguished guests, including the mayor and village elders. Karen, often feeling out of place at such fancy events, worried about the condescending stares from others who saw her as a simpleton from the wilderness. She lamented the lack of stores in Nina Rich selling appropriate dresses for such an occasion and her inability to travel to the larger shopping areas. Karen expressed her desire to have hair as shiny and smooth as his, hoping it would at least prevent her from being looked down upon. Understanding her concern, Shiro promised to help, assuring her that she would outshine everyone with his hair care products. Karen was curious about his special hair regimen, and Shiro vowed to also prepare a beautiful dress for her, ensuring she wouldn't feel embarrassed, even at a royal gathering. He promised to make her the center of attention, transforming her into a true lady. After Karen left, Shiro returned home that night and started researching famous party dresses. Arisu, noticing his focus, asked what he was doing. Shiro explained he was looking for a suitable dress for Karen, the mayor. Arisu, misunderstanding, thought Shiro wanted to change his own style, recalling her own past preferences before she died. Shiro clarified it was for Karen, not himself. Arisu squinted and teasingly asked if Shiro liked Karen, hinting that she noticed Karen's ample bosom. Shiro quickly corrected her, explaining it was simply because he had promised Karen. Arisu, playfully skeptical, decided to find the perfect dress for Karen. Shiro, noting Arisu's usual ash-gray, unattractive attire, doubted her fashion sense. Arisu coolly replied that she dressed according to the situation, maintaining a certain level of elegance.